The protocol executes exactly as designed. A silent transmission slips through the validation gates, reading as a routine configuration update. It requests kernel-level access. The system checks the digital signature, finds it entirely valid, and obediently opens the deepest layer of its architecture. There is no alert. No alarm triggers in the Global Operations Center. The file sits in the system directory, dormant, silently waiting for the machine to process its parameters. When the memory cycle initiates, the underlying logic fractures. A memory address points toward an empty void. The core system architecture collapses rapidly under its own structural weight. The screen flickers, then goes perfectly, uniformly dead. Across the network, a second machine instantly mirrors the failure. Then a third. The code propagates outward, a fully authorized command evolving into an apex event. The architecture is blinding itself, and no one watching the monitors yet knows why. What we just witnessed was not a sophisticated intrusion orchestrated by a state-sponsored collective. It was not a breach of perimeter defenses. It was a standard, automated configuration update distributed to one of the most widely used cybersecurity platforms on the planet. The record shows that on July 19, 2024, at exactly 0409 UTC, CrowdStrike pushed a seemingly routine file to millions of systems running its Falcon sensor. The payload was identified in the registry simply as Channel File 291. It was not executable code, but rather a configuration file meant to update the system's telemetry definitions. According to official metrics published by Microsoft later that same month, the rollout disabled approximately 8.5 million Windows devices globally. The update pushed these machines into an infinite loop, resulting in a continuous blue screen of death. The hardware was rendered entirely inoperable, requiring physical manual intervention to reboot and delete the corrupted file. The impact was immediate and systemic. Major airlines grounded their fleets, leaving runways eerily vacant across international hubs. Documents confirm that Delta Airlines alone suffered thousands of flight cancellations, culminating in a lawsuit filed against CrowdStrike on October 25, 2024, citing severe operational and financial damages resulting from the operational halt. In the healthcare sector, the disruption crossed into critical territory. Massachusetts General Hospital, one of the premier medical facilities in the United States, was forced to abruptly cancel all non-urgent surgeries for the day. Medical personnel lost access to digital patient records, imaging systems, and scheduling networks. The federal government immediately recognized the severity. According to a public advisory titled Widespread IT Outage, due to CrowdStrike update issued by the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, on July 19th, the event affected virtually every sector of the modern economy. Global stock exchanges reported connectivity drops. Emergency broadcast systems and regional 901 dispatch centers went dark. As the global blackout dominated news cycles, the initial assumption by many was a coordinated global strike. But the reality was far more sterile. Hours into the crisis, CrowdStrike CEO George Kurtz posted a brief statement on X. The message was notably austere, given the unprecedented scale of the paralysis. He stated unequivocally, "This is not a security incident or cyber attack." The failure was entirely internal. The system designed to protect global networks had systematically dismantled them. The threat did not come from the outside. It was pushed directly through secure channels trusted by critical institutions, initiating a profound operational collapse. Based on available records and technical analysis, this is the most likely sequence of events. Long before the global infrastructure collapsed, the system initiated a standard pipeline operation for what CrowdStrike categorized as rapid response content. This classification was designed for speed, pushing updated threat detection parameters to endpoints without requiring a full sensor reboot. Channel File 291 was generated within this rapid stream. It was not a complex executable. It was essentially a list of conditions, a small configuration payload structured to tell the Falcon sensor what anomalous behaviors to look for in the wild. Most likely, the file moved through the internal compilation servers seamlessly. The parameters were established, targeting specific telemetry fields within the Windows environment, but deep within its structure, a fatal logic flaw existed, a mismatch between what the local sensor expected to read and the actual number of inputs the file contained. The file proceeded down the automated pipeline, arriving at the most crucial checkpoint, the content validator. This was the primary safeguard, the definitive wall between development and global distribution. The content validator was explicitly engineered to simulate the payload, to execute the new configuration against a template to ensure it would not destabilize the host operating system. The available evidence suggests the validator thoroughly analyzed channel file 291. It checked the underlying syntax. It verified the digital signature. But the validator contained its own invisible flaw, a latent internal bug that had never been triggered during previous deployments. It relied on an outdated validation template, assuming the new input perfectly matched previously established array boundaries. The validator looked precisely where the critical error was located, and its own broken logic told it the structure was entirely sound. A green light was recorded in the deployment log. The automated safeguard had failed completely. The file was packaged, cryptographically signed, and approved for immediate distribution. At exactly 0409 UTC on July 19th, the deployment gate opened wide. What the logs indicate is a massive, highly efficient distribution wave that operated exactly as designed. Millions of Falcon sensors, deeply embedded in the kernels of Windows machines globally, actively polled the cloud infrastructure for updates. They detected channel file 291. They downloaded it over encrypted connections. Because the file possessed a valid signature from the vendor, the Windows operating system stepped aside, granting the configuration immediate, unquestioned access to the most privileged layer of the machine's architecture. The exact moment the local sensor attempted to read the newly loaded parameters, the logic mismatched. The system desperately reached for a memory address that did not exist. At the kernel level, an unhandled exception does not result in a simple error message. It results in immediate, total systemic preservation by self-destruction. The operating system violently halted all processes to protect itself from memory corruption. Then began the 78 minutes of absolute silence. Between 0409 and 0527 UTC, channel file 291 lived completely in the wild. Once the file was pushed to the content delivery network, there was no centralized kill switch capable of reaching the machines that had already ingested it. For over an hour, the deployment mechanism simply continued to operate, feeding the file to any system that requested it. As system administrators slept, servers spanning multiple time zones checked in, pulled the mandatory update, and instantly severed their own consciousness. Hospital networks, airline dispatch arrays, and financial databases continuously downloaded their own demise. The telemetry going back to the vendor would not immediately show system errors. It would simply show a rapidly expanding void where millions of active machines had previously existed. The available records show that the flawed configuration was finally reverted in the central cloud at 0527 UTC 78 minutes after deployment. But reverting a file on a remote server does not remove it from a local machine that can no longer boot. For the 8.5 million systems already compromised, the rollback was entirely meaningless. They were hopelessly trapped in a permanent loop of fatal errors, locked out of the network, and untouchable by any remote commands. The file had executed its parameters flawlessly. It had bypassed the validator, infiltrated the kernel, and neutralized the host. The global infrastructure was fundamentally broken, but the lingering question inside the silent server rooms wasn't about the machines that died that day. What hidden logic bombs might still be quietly waiting inside their trusted validation systems. As daylight moved across the globe on July 19, the sheer scale of the digital paralysis became undeniable. The initial hours were defined by a terrifying vacuum of verified information. System administrators stared helplessly at cascades of blue screens, while international crisis management teams braced for what appeared to be the most devastating cyber attack in modern history. The leading theories gravitated toward a massive nation-state intrusion targeting foundational layers of global infrastructure. Then, the overwhelming silence was broken. At roughly 5:45 a.m. Eastern Time, CrowdStrike CEO George Kurtz published a remarkably brief statement on the social media platform X. He confirmed that a defect had been found in a routine content update for Windows hosts. And then he added a definitive sentence that instantly reframed the entire event. "This is not a security incident or cyber attack." The extreme austerity of that corporate message stood in stark contrast to the catastrophe unfolding on the ground. A single statement attempting to contextualize a disaster that had already escaped containment. The economic damage was not theoretical. The widely reported figure of 8.5 million paralyzed machines remained a cold, abstract metric simply too massive to fully comprehend. To understand the gravity of that morning, one must look away from the server racks and into the physical world. At Massachusetts General Hospital, one of the most advanced medical facilities on the planet, the digital nervous system evaporated without warning. The hospital was forced to take the extreme measure of canceling all non-urgent surgeries for the entire day. Doctors abruptly lost access to critical patient histories, digital imaging, and automated dispensation protocols. The abstract failure of a remote configuration file translated directly into dark operating rooms, and patients turned away at the doors. Weeks later, the methodical search for technical accountability began. On August 6, 2024, CrowdStrike released its external technical root cause analysis. The 12-page document meticulously details the mechanics of the failure, explaining exactly how channel file 291 caused an out-of-bounds memory read, and how the proprietary content validator harbored a latent software bug that allowed the fatal file to pass blindly through the deployment gates. But while the official document perfectly explains the technical mechanism, it leaves a noticeable void regarding the institutional mechanics. What the root cause analysis never explains publicly is the human architecture behind the deployment policy. The document freely admits there was a difference between how core sensor content and rapid updates were handled. Yet, there is no mention of who made the decision to treat rapid response content with less rigorous testing protocols. The public record does not clarify when that policy was established, or if any engineer had previously flagged the risk of pushing configuration updates without a staged rollout. Furthermore, the documentation remains completely silent on the internal approval chain. There is no published record detailing who specifically authorized the 2 fatal template instances on July 19th. These missing pieces of information are not accusations of malice. They are simply verified gaps in the official public record. They represent the opaque boundary between public accountability and proprietary corporate operations. By the time Adam Meyers, a senior vice president at CrowdStrike, testified before the House Subcommittee on Cybersecurity on September 23, 2024, the narrative was strictly focused on remediation. During the congressional testimony, he detailed the new safeguards, the implementation of staggered deployments, and the improved validation checks. He offered formal apologies and assured lawmakers that the specific technical conditions of July 19th could never be repeated. Yet, as the congressional hearings concluded, a deeper, far more unsettling reality lingered in the official record. The software had worked exactly as the corporate architecture allowed it to work. The patch was applied to the code, but the structural philosophy that authorized its rapid global distribution remained largely unexamined. What we don't know and what that might mean. The technical fixes implemented immediately after July 19 successfully addressed the specific internal malfunction of channel file 291. But resolving a single isolated logic bug does not answer the broader structural questions that allowed the catastrophic failure to propagate so widely and so rapidly. If we look strictly at the operational mechanics of the modern digital ecosystem, 2 entirely distinct possibilities emerge regarding the true nature of the disaster. The first possibility is that the global blackout was essentially a failure by design. In the current cybersecurity landscape, the speed of defense must absolutely outpace the relentless speed of attack. The model of rapid response content, frequent daily updates, lightweight testing, and automated global deployment was not a simple accident, a careless oversight, or a display of corporate negligence. It was a deliberate, highly calculated engineering decision. To protect millions of critical endpoints from zero-day threats in real time, operational friction had to be purposefully removed from the deployment pipeline. Under this security philosophy, July 19 was not a freak anomaly. It was the inevitable statistical cost of maintaining that required velocity over time. If this theoretical framework is true, the fundamental risk has never been eliminated. The ultimate question is not if this exact scenario will happen again with CrowdStrike. The question is when it will inevitably occur with another security vendor operating under the exact same fundamental assumptions of prioritizing deployment speed over exhaustive local testing. The second possibility suggests the true failure had absolutely nothing to do with software testing workflows or internal corporate policies. Instead, it represents an invisible single point of systemic failure. The underlying crisis is one of extreme, unprecedented technological concentration. Over the last decade, a single security vendor was granted unchecked kernel-level access to protect an estimated 15 to 20% of the entire global Windows infrastructure. This extreme concentration transformed a localized configuration glitch into a worldwide systemic collapse. The incident of July 19th was not just a widespread software malfunction. It was the first fully documented demonstration that placing critical global infrastructure into the hands of a few dominant vendors creates massive structural vulnerabilities that no internal quality assurance team can possibly prevent. When the ecosystem is this heavily centralized, an isolated local error immediately becomes an unavoidable planetary threat. We are left facing an extremely uncomfortable reality. The very architecture we actively built to defend our digital existence is simultaneously capable of completely paralyzing it in less than 80 minutes. Neither scenario offers a comforting resolution, because neither scenario can be easily patched with a software update. As long as those profound architectural questions remain entirely unanswered, the precise baseline conditions that broke the world remain firmly in place. The July 19th collapse rests on one foundational detail. Channel File 291 only dismantled those machines because it operated inside the Windows kernel, and it was inside the kernel because Microsoft explicitly allowed it to be there. Following the 78-minute blackout, Microsoft quietly opened a sensitive dialogue. They began asking whether any third-party security vendor should truly hold the keys to the deepest layer of the operating system, or if that level of profound trust is structurally reckless. This conversation about access, trust, and who grants it is not new. It leads directly back to an older, far more secretive incident, one where that exact same logic of deep system access produced consequences that nobody saw coming and took years to fully understand. Because when you grant absolute access to the core of an architecture, you also grant absolute vulnerability. As we investigate that timeline for our next case, consider the reality we live in today. Between the two scenarios we examined, was July 19th the statistical cost of a failure by design, or the inevitable breaking of an invisible single point? Leave your technical assessment in the comments below.